Hello friends, this is Shashank Kumar Rajak and I will be presenting a lecture series on quadratic equations. Here is a brief information about me. I am currently an undergraduate student at IIT Kharagpur. I love writing articles, reading books, and in my free time I also love cooking. I am passionate about teaching. So here are the course objectives. First of all, we will learn what is a quadratic equation, some examples of quadratic equation, how to solve a quadratic equation, and then we will learn different problems related to roots of a quadratic equation. The target audience for this lecture series will be mainly class 10th students who will be appearing in different board exams and CBSE board exams or school exams. It will also help students preparing for Olympiads and other competitive exams like IIT JEE and other national and state level competitive examinations. So here is the first lecture of this lecture series, which is an introduction to quadratic equation. The objective of this lecture is we will learn what is a quadratic equation, how to identify a quadratic equation. We will see some examples of quadratic equation. Then we will see some problems, and lastly I will give you some problems to think on your own. So let us start. So quadratic equation. An equation in the form of ax square plus bx plus c is equal to 0 is called a quadratic equation. Okay. So any equation which is of this form ax square plus bx plus c is equal to 0, that will be called a quadratic equation. Here x is a variable in this equation. That means x can take any value and we will have to solve this equation for the value of x, for finding the value of x. Here a, b, c are any real numbers. They can be any real numbers like -5, 6, 3, 1, any real numbers. And the most important thing to note here is that a cannot be equal to 0 in a quadratic equation. A is the coefficient of x square and it should not be equal to 0 in a quadratic equation. Okay, if a becomes 0, this whole term ax square will become 0. Okay, and if this term becomes 0, this equation will become bx plus c is equal to 0, which is a linear equation, not a quadratic equation. In a quadratic equation, x square term has to be present, and for that a should not be equal to 0. B and C can be 0 in a quadratic equation, but A should not be equal to 0. Okay, you have to remember this, you have to keep it in your mind. A should not be equal to 0 in a quadratic equation and it should have the x square term. Okay, now we will see some examples of quadratic equation. The first example is 2x square minus 3x plus 1 is equal to 0. Okay, whenever you see an equation, you compare it with the standard form of quadratic equation, which is ax square plus bx plus c is equal to 0, and if it matches the standard form of quadratic equation, then it is a quadratic equation. And here it is of the form of ax square plus bx plus c is equal to 0, and that is why it is a quadratic equation. Okay, now we will identify what are a, b, c in this equation, and this identification of a, b, c will also help you in subsequent lectures. So see here, the a is the coefficient of x square, which is 2 here, that is why a is equal to 2. B is the coefficient of x, and here b is -3. Okay, so b becomes -3, and many of you can make mistake here in plus minus sign. So keep it in mind that in the standard form here we have plus b, and here it is -3. Okay, and that is why b is becoming -3, not +3. You have to consider the sign also. Okay, many of you will be making mistake, so keep it in your mind that sign is very important. And c is +1. So in this way, this is a quadratic equation. The second equation is 5x square is equal to 0. Okay, now it contains the x square term, and that is why it is a quadratic equation. Here other terms are not present. That means b and c are equal to 0. B and c here are 0, and That is why 5x square is equal to 0 is also a quadratic equation with a is equal to 5 and having the x square term. The next equation is 4x square minus 1 is equal to 0. Here we have the x square term, and that is why it is a quadratic equation. It also satisfies the standard form ax square plus bx plus c is equal to 0, where a is 4 and c is minus 1 and the x term is 0, and that is why here b is 0. The next example is 3x square plus 5x is equal to 0. Here it is also a quadratic equation with a is equal to 3, b is equal to 5, and the last term is 0 here, and that is why c is equal to 0. So all these equations are examples of quadratic equation of the form of ax square plus bx plus c is equal to 0, okay, where b and c can be 0 at the same time or at differently, but a should not be equal to 0. In all these equations, a was a non-zero number. The last example is 6x plus 9 is equal to 0. Okay, so here we see that here we don't have any x square term. Okay, that means the value of a is equal to 0 here, and although b and c are present, 6x plus 9 with b is equal to 6 and c is equal to 9, but here the x square term is 0, and that is why it is not a quadratic equation. Okay, so this thing is very important, that a should not be equal to 0 in a quadratic equation. If a becomes 0, the equation no longer remains a quadratic equation, so keep it in your mind. Here is one example of quadratic equation. We will see it. Suppose your school decides to construct a playground having an area of 300 square meters. Okay, your school is planning to construct a playground whose area is 300 square meter. The length of the playground is desired to be 1 meter more than the twice of its breadth. Whatever the breadth of the playground will be, okay, the length will be 1 meter more than the twice of its breadth. Okay, so we don't know what is the value of length and breadth of this playground, but we know the relationship. We know a specific relationship between length and breadth, and on the basis of that we have to find out the value of length and breadth. And we also know the area of the playground. Area of the playground is fixed, that is 300 square meters. Now let us assume that the breadth of the playground to be x meters. Okay, assume that the breadth of the playground is x meters, then according to this relationship the length of the playground will become 2x plus 1. Okay, length of the playground is twice of the breadth plus 1 meter. Okay, so x is breadth, twice of the breadth is 2x, and 1 meter more is 2x plus 1. So in this way the length becomes 2x plus 1 and breadth is x meters. Now since the playground is rectangular with breadth having x meters and length is 2x plus 1 meters, so according to the formula of area of the rectangle, area of this playground will become length into breadth, which is 2x plus 1 and 2x, and that is equal to 300, because we know the area of the playground. Solving this equation, 2x plus 1 into x is equal to 300, we get 2x square plus x is equal to 300, and bringing 300 on the left hand side we will get this final equation, which is 2x square plus x minus 300 is equal to 0. So comparing this equation with the standard form of equation, which is ax square plus bx plus c is equal to 0, okay, we get that okay, this is a quadratic equation because it satisfies the standard form of equation ax square plus bx plus c is equal to 0, with a is equal to 2, b is equal to 1, and c is equal to minus 300. Okay, by solving this quadratic equation we can get the value of x, and on the basis of that we can find the value of length and breadth of this playground. So here we see that how with a certain information we can find the required value by solving a quadratic equation. Okay, so it also shows you some real life example of quadratic equation. Okay, by using quadratic equation you can solve your daily problems. So you will find such more problems in your textbooks and also in your exams. So this was just a basic. We will be seeing many more problems like this in our further lectures. Here is a problem regarding the identification of quadratic equation. It says check whether the given equation is a quadratic equation or not. Okay, this is the given equation, and you have to identify that whether this equation is a quadratic equation or not. The equation is x into x plus 1 plus 8 is equal to x plus 2 into x minus 2. Okay, at first sight when you look at this equation, you may consider that okay, this is a quadratic equation because it is having the x square term. X into x becomes x square, so it might be a quadratic equation. This may be your reaction, but don't judge an equation by merely looking at it. You solve it to its simplest form, okay, and then decide whether this equation is a quadratic equation, cubic equation, or linear equation, any form of equation. Okay, first of all, let us solve this question. So here is the equation given to you: x into x plus 1 plus 8 is equal to x plus 2 into x minus 2. Okay, by opening the brackets and solving all the plus minus signs, it becomes x square plus x plus 8 is equal to, here we will apply a plus b into a minus b formula. We will get a square minus b square, that is x square minus 4. Okay, now see here, the x square and x square terms in both sides are positive, and hence they both get cancelled. And see how the x square term is becoming 0, and what we are left with is x plus 12 is equal to 0. So here initially it was looking like it will be having x square term, but eventually the x square terms cancel out, and we are left with x plus 12 is equal to 0. And definitely it is not having the x square term, and that is why it is not a quadratic equation. You can also compare it with the standard form of equation, which is ax square plus bx plus c is equal to 0. It is having the bx term, it is having the c term, but it is not having the x square term, which is the main property of a quadratic equation, and that is why we can say that it is not a quadratic equation. Also here a term is 0, and since a is not equal to 0 in a quadratic equation, hence the given equation is not a quadratic equation. Okay, so this is how you can identify whether a given equation is a quadratic equation or not. Solve the equation to its simplest form and compare it with the standard form of equation, which is ax square plus bx plus c is equal to 0, and check whether it satisfies the standard form of equation or not. Okay, and this is the most important thing. Keep it in your mind. A should not be equal to 0 in a quadratic equation. Okay, and these are some problems to think on your own. Try these problems, find whether these equations are quadratic equations or not. They will be solved similar in a similar way like we solved the previous example problem. So solve these two equations to their simplest forms and compare them with the standard form of quadratic equation. Okay, and if they satisfy those if they satisfy the standard form of quadratic equation, then they will be called quadratic equation. Otherwise they will not be considered quadratic equation. They are simple. Just try your hands on these two problems, and if you have any doubt, then comment on the video. I will try to solve those. In the upcoming lecture we will be seeing how to find the solution of a quadratic equation. This will be a very important lecture, don't miss it. And thank you for watching this lecture. Spread the word about this educational revolution. Comment on this video, provide your feedback, and share this video. If you have any doubts, comment on this video. We will solve this. And thank you once again. Have a good day.